When I picked up the phone to ask my son Marcus Carter when his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law, Keisha Banks Carter, looked me right in the eye and said with a calm little smile that cut straight through me, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those two words slammed into me like a burst of icy water. Special people. I stood frozen in the middle of my own living room in Cascade Heights, phone heavy in my hand, my chest tightening with something that felt like disbelief turning into ache. For 3 straight years I had paid their rent, $500 every month, furnished their apartment top to bottom, filled their refrigerator when it was empty, and still I wasn't special enough to watch my only child promise his life to someone else. The air inside my house went still. Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. He kept glancing at the floor, guilt flickering behind his lashes, while Keisha settled herself comfortably on the gray sofa I had bought for them last Christmas. The pale pink lace dress I'd chosen for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, next to the new shoes, and the hope that I'd stand in at least one picture beside my son and his bride. I'd spent $200 on that dress, picturing how proud I'd look in Marcus's wedding photos I now knew would never include me. For weeks I'd planned every detail, pressed my hair, cleaned the whole house top to bottom, even saved an extra $1,000 to give them as a wedding gift. I'd called my sister Diana up in Chicago to tell her the good news and how excited I was. I'd cooked collard greens and cornbread thinking they'd come by after the ceremony so we could celebrate as a family. All those plans collapsed in a heartbeat with those 4 poisoned words, "Only special people." Marcus finally raised his eyes and spoke, his voice sounding practiced, almost coached. "Ma, it was an intimate thing, really small. Just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But even as he spoke, I knew it wasn't true. I had already seen the photos on social media. Keisha's parents smiling beside the bride and groom, her brothers and sisters toasting with champagne, her friends commenting heart emojis, and finally, under every picture, I saw Keisha in her white gown. The same gown I had unknowingly helped pay for when I sent her $800 last month for personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see, every moment that had happened without me. A week later, 7 exact days after that humiliation, my phone rang again. This time, Keisha's voice had changed completely. Gone was that smooth, confident tone. Now she sounded nervous, rushed, desperate. "Miss Laverne, the rent's overdue. The landlord's threatening to kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled, thin and anxious, as though the world were ending. For a moment, I said nothing. The silence stretched between us while I remembered all the times I had rushed to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans so they wouldn't be without a roof. All the nights I'd eaten beans and rice because I'd chosen to give them my grocery money. And now, after they'd excluded me from the most important day of their lives, they had the nerve to call me as if nothing had happened. Finally, I spoke, steady and calm, my voice the sound of a door closing for good. "Keisha, didn't I tell you I only help special people?" The silence that followed was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. For the first time in years, it wasn't me trembling. It was her. I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies, I thought. Sweet, polished lies wrapped in a sugar voice that always came out when she needed something. This time, the words slid right past me without leaving a mark. I looked out the window toward my little front yard, where the hydrangeas glowed under the Georgia sun, and whispered to myself, "Calm and certain, not anymore." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, my hands folded over the smooth wood that still smelled faintly of lemon polish. Outside, cicadas hummed through the Georgia heat. Inside, the only sound was the slow, even beat of my own breathing. The anger that had burned like fire a week ago had cooled into something sharper, cleaner, resolve. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to the phone or the bank. I didn't apologize for wanting a life of my own. I simply sat there and opened the small notebook I kept in a drawer beneath my checkbook. The paper inside was lined with my careful handwriting, lists, notes, grocery reminders. But now I turned to a clean page and wrote at the top in block letters, "Money given to Marcus and Keisha." The pen glided slow but steady. Rent, $500 every month for 3 years. $18,000 groceries and furniture. $5,000 wedding outfit and gift savings. 4,200 car repairs, insurance help, and emergencies. 9,200. I tallied the numbers twice. Then underlined the total, $33,400. $33,400. Poured into a couple who couldn't find room for me at their wedding. My jaw tightened. Every number on that page was a piece of me. My extra shifts at the elementary school before retirement, the vacations I never took, the shoes I wore 2 winters too long. I had carried them like a mother carries a child, believing love meant always giving. But love without respect? That was nothing but servitude dressed up in affection. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't move. A minute later, another call. Then a message pinged through. I could imagine Keisha's face twisting in annoyance, her thumb stabbing at the keypad. I didn't need to read her words to know their shape. "Please, Miss Laverne, just this one time." The same script, recycled every month. I placed the phone face down. I wasn't that woman anymore. The next morning, sunlight filtered through my curtains like quiet promise. I put on a soft yellow dress, brushed out my hair, and slipped my feet into flats. Then I walked the 6 blocks down to West End Bank, the same branch where I'd stood countless times wiring money with a tired smile. The guard at the door nodded kindly. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said. "Good morning, baby," I replied, my voice warm but purposeful. Inside, Darnell King, the branch manager, greeted me with a grin that faded when he saw the folder in my hands. "Everything okay, Miss Laverne?" I smiled politely. "It's going to be." We sat down in his small glass office. I opened my folder and slid a page across the desk. "I'd like to cancel all automatic transfers to my son's account," I said. "Effective immediately." Darnell looked hesitant. "You sure about that?" "It's been a regular setup for years." "I'm sure," I said. "It's time to keep my blessings where they belong. With me." He nodded slowly, tapped a few keys, and printed confirmation papers. When I signed them, I felt something loosen deep inside me like a door opening. For the first time, the money that used to run from me toward someone else's comfort would stay still long enough to build my own peace. As I walked out into the Atlanta sunlight, I noticed how different the world looked. Even the heat felt lighter on my shoulders. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered, my tone smooth as glass. "Marcus, baby, I'm fine. You don't need to worry about me no more." He hesitated. "Ma, I cut him off gently. "I know, sweetheart. You and Keisha got everything handled now. Congratulations again on your wedding." He went quiet, the silence of a man realizing the well had run dry. "Ma," he started again, but I hung up before he could turn apology into another request. I slid the phone into my purse and walked toward the park, the cicadas buzzing like applause in the trees. That evening, I made myself dinner for one, baked salmon, roasted vegetables, and a glass of sweet tea. The food tasted different, not expensive, not extravagant, but mine. When I washed the dishes, I didn't think about anyone else's rent, or groceries, or bills. I thought about how my life, for the first time in years, belonged only to me. I went to bed early that night. The house was quiet, and so was my mind. For the first time since that humiliating phone call, I slept without anger. Without guilt. Only peace. The morning after I canceled the transfers, I woke up feeling lighter, but that peace didn't last long. Around noon, the doorbell rang. 3 sharp knocks that didn't sound like neighbors or delivery. I looked through the peephole and saw Marcus, Keisha, and a man in a suit standing on my porch. My stomach clenched. The man was carrying a briefcase, his smile polished. Too professional for a family visit. I opened the door just enough to let my voice through. "Can I help y'all?" Marcus forced a smile. "Ma, this is Mr. Carl Benton. He's our attorney. We just wanted to clear up some paperwork." "Attorney?" The word stung. "What kind of paperwork?" I asked, my voice steady. Keisha stepped forward, all syrup and charm. It's just a small thing, Miss Laverne. Something to make things easier. Marcus told me how stressful it's been managing everything alone. This would give us permission to help you with your finances, so you don't have to worry anymore. She extended a stack of papers toward me, but I didn't take them. I looked her dead in the eye. You mean so I don't have to worry? Or so you can stop worrying about the money flow? Her smile froze for half a second before she turned to Marcus, silently begging him to take over. Ma, he said, lowering his voice like we were in church. You know we love you. We just want to make sure things are in order. You're 71 now and what? I cut him off. You think I can't handle my own business? I've handled it fine while raising you, paying your rent and cleaning up after your decisions. The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to take control. Mrs. Carter, this is just a standard power of attorney. Perfectly normal. I stepped back and slammed the door halfway shut between us. Not in this house, it isn't. The silence on the porch stretched long. I could hear Keisha whispering something sharp to Marcus, her voice cracking under her smile. The lawyer said something about taking a different approach. I didn't wait to hear more. When I finally opened the door again, they were still there, 3 silhouettes against the Georgia sunlight. Let me make something clear, I said quietly. Y'all don't come to my home uninvited again. I've taken care of myself my whole life. I don't need help spending my own money, and I don't need lawyers to tell me what's good for me. Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to something close to anger. Ma, you're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, but it'll be my mistake, not yours. Then I shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and stood in the quiet for a full minute until I could hear my own breath steady again. Inside, the air felt heavy, but beneath that weight was something else. Power. The kind I hadn't felt in years. I walked to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out my checkbook. One by one, I tore out the canceled pages where I'd written their names, Marcus Carter and Keisha Banks Carter. I stacked the torn pieces, carried them to the kitchen sink, and watched the paper dissolve under running water. Each fragment drifted away like the last remnants of obligation. That night, my phone lit up with messages. Marcus. Ma. Please just talk to me. Keisha. We're worried about you, Marcus. You're overreacting, Marcus. We love you, Keisha. We need to fix this before things get worse. I didn't answer a single one. The next morning, I called attorney Harold Weaver, a man recommended by my neighbor, Miss Eleanor Jackson, who'd once worked in community law. When he picked up, his voice was calm, kind, professional. Mrs. Carter, what can I do for you? I think my son and his wife are trying to take over my finances, I said. All right, he replied without surprise. You did the right thing calling me first. Let's make sure everything's documented. By the time I hung up, the anxiety in my chest had turned into quiet determination. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the sunset stain the Atlanta skyline in shades of orange and violet. I thought about every sacrifice, every bill, every apology I'd made over the years. I had mistaken enabling for love, fear for loyalty. Now I finally understood. Love that demands your silence isn't love. It's control. When I went to bed that night, I locked every door and left my phone on silent. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel fragile. I felt brand new, like a woman who had finally learned how to say no and mean it. The next morning broke soft and gold over Cascade Heights, sunlight sliding through my blinds like a quiet apology. I woke without the familiar ache in my chest, the one that used to rise with every text from Marcus or every memory of the money I'd wired away. For once, I didn't feel like somebody's safety net. I felt like a woman with choices. I brewed a pot of chicory coffee, humming along to the radio while the scent filled the kitchen. My house felt different now, lighter, freer, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after years of holding secrets. On the counter lay the folder from attorney Harold Weaver, marked neatly with my name. Inside were copies of every form we'd filed, account protections, banking statements, legal notices that secured what was mine. The papers weren't just documents. They were proof that I had finally taken my life back. By mid-morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Something just for me. I pulled on a floral blouse, tied a scarf around my curls, and took the MARTA bus downtown to a little beauty salon on Auburn Avenue where I used to go before Marcus's emergencies had eaten through my budget. The door jingled as I stepped inside, and the air filled with the warm smell of pressing oil and hairspray. "Miss Laverne," the owner, Tanya Reed, called from behind a styling chair. "Girl, it's been ages. Come on in. You look like you need some TLC." I laughed, a real laugh from the belly. You have no idea. For 2 hours, Tanya washed, trimmed, and rolled my hair while we talked about everything but family drama. She told me about her grandbaby. I told her about the little garden I was planning to start behind the house. When she turned me toward the mirror at the end, I hardly recognized the woman staring back, chin lifted, eyes brighter, silver streaks shining like threads of wisdom instead of age. "Now that's the Miss Laverne I remember," Tanya said. "That's the one I'm remembering too," I whispered. I left the salon feeling 10 pounds lighter. On my walk home, I stopped at Green's Market to buy fresh flowers and peaches. The young cashier complimented my hair, and I smiled so wide my cheeks ached. It had been years since I'd felt seen for anything other than what I could give. When I got home, I filled a vase with water and arranged the flowers on my dining table. Their color lit the whole room. Then I sat with my notebook, the same one where I'd once listed all the money I'd spent, and this time I opened to a fresh page. Across the top, I wrote in bold letters, "Things I want." Underneath, I listed a trip to Savannah in the fall, a new Sunday hat, dinner out once a month, just because. To learn how to paint again, to live without fear. I didn't owe anyone those dreams. They were mine and mine alone. Late that afternoon, Miss Eleanor Jackson, my next-door neighbor, stopped by. She was carrying a basket of collard greens from her backyard. "You been quiet lately, Miss Laverne," she said, stepping into my kitchen. "Everything all right?" "Everything's better than all right," I told her, setting out 2 glasses of sweet tea. I told her what had happened, the secret wedding, the lawyer visit, the locks changed. She listened without interrupting, her eyes full of the kind of empathy only another grown woman could give. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "Baby, choosing yourself don't make you selfish. It make you whole. You can't pour from an empty cup." Her words settled deep, like truth I already knew but needed to hear out loud. After she left, I stood by the window, watching the light fade over the neighborhood. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for a phone call, an apology, or anyone's approval. I made myself a simple dinner, okra, rice, and a bit of salmon, and ate in peace, no TV, no noise. Later, I took a warm bath, massaging lotion into my hands that had spent a lifetime giving. When I crawled into bed, the sheets smelled like lavender, and the air felt still, blessed. As I drifted off to sleep, I whispered to myself, Laverne Carter finally chose herself, and the house, once heavy with obligation, seemed to whisper back, about time. The morning sun poured through my kitchen blinds like liquid gold. But peace doesn't always last long when people think you owe them something. It had been 4 quiet days since I'd changed my phone number and stopped responding to messages. But quiet can make desperate folks bold. That Tuesday morning, I was sitting with my coffee when I noticed a dark sedan creeping slow past the house. It rolled by once, then twice. My gut knew before my mind caught up. Marcus. Or Keisha, maybe both. I didn't get up. I just sipped my coffee and let the camera above my porch record every second. By noon, I made a decision. I wasn't going to live halfway free. Either I was protected or I wasn't, and I intended to be. So I picked up my phone and called Solomon Summers, who ran the hardware store down on Westview Avenue, a good man from church who'd always been fair with his prices. "Solomon," I said, "I need to secure this house. New locks, reinforced doors, full alarm system. The whole thing." He didn't ask questions, just said, "Yes, ma'am, Miss Laverne." My nephew Jalen will come by in the morning. He's sharp with that kind of work. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I slept with the lights off. There was something sacred about that darkness. Not the kind that hides danger, but the kind that holds peace. At exactly 8 the next morning, a small pickup pulled into my driveway. Jalen Summers, tall and polite, stepped out carrying a toolbox and a confident smile. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said. "Uncle Saul told me to treat this like my grandma's house." That made me smile. "Then do it right, baby." He got to work immediately, replacing every lock, tightening the door frames, mounting cameras under the eaves. While he worked, Solomon stopped by to deliver a new set of reinforced hinges. The two of them moved steady, respectful, laughing softly while gospel music played from the radio I'd turned on in the kitchen. My phone buzzed again, over and over, from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't have to wonder who it was. The calls came in waves, Marcus's voice on one, Keisha's on another, then unknown caller. I turned the ringer off and poured myself more coffee. I wasn't going to let noise distract me from safety. When Jalen finished, he showed me how to use the system. "You can see everything right from your phone, ma'am," he said, demonstrating. "Anyone walks up, it alerts you instantly. If someone forces the lock, the police get a signal within seconds." I nodded slowly, holding the small control panel like something sacred. "Thank you, Jalen. You don't know how much I needed this." He smiled. "You'd be surprised, Miss Laverne. My grandma had to do the same thing when her sons started thinking her pension belonged to them." That hit me in the chest, not because it hurt, but because it reminded me I wasn't alone. I gave them both extra for their time and a container of pound cake for the road. Solomon tipped his hat before they drove off. "Keep your peace, Miss Laverne. Ain't nothing more expensive than sanity." By afternoon, my home felt new, quiet, steady, under my control. I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching the breeze move through the hydrangeas I'd planted years ago. The air smelled of rain and freedom, but peace, once again, didn't last long. At 5 o'clock sharp, heavy banging rattled my door. Not knocking, banging. I checked the screen on my phone. Marcus stood there, his face tight with anger, Keisha behind him with her arms crossed like a statue. "Ma," he shouted. "You can't just shut us out like this. We're your family." Family. The word that used to mean comfort now sounded like intrusion. "Ma, open this door. We just want to talk." Keisha's voice followed, shrill, impatient, the same tone she used when she thought charm might fail. I took a long breath, walked to the door, but didn't open it. "Marcus," I said through the wood, "you don't have permission to be here. Leave before I call the police. You're overreacting." He barked. "Keisha's right. Something's wrong with you." I pressed a button on my phone. The system chirped once, loud enough to make them jump. "You have 10 seconds before the police get here," I said calmly. "Go home." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus muttered something under his breath, low and ugly, before yanking Keisha's hand and storming off the porch. 15 minutes later, the patrol car rolled up anyway. My alarm system had already sent the alert. 2 officers came to the door, both polite and professional. "Evening, ma'am," one said. "We got a call about a possible disturbance." "Everything all right?" "Everything's fine now," I answered, handing him a bottle of cold water. "Just some family trouble. Nothing the law can't remind them to respect." They nodded, checked the footage I'd already queued on my phone, and left satisfied. When they were gone, I sat on my couch with trembling hands. I wasn't scared anymore, just sad. The kind of sadness that feels like acceptance. I turned on Mahalia Jackson's voice from my old speaker, her deep, holy sound filling every corner of my house. Then I spoke out loud, softly, but with conviction. "I'm not theirs to use. I'm mine to protect." Later that night, I went room to room, checking each lock, each camera light blinking like a quiet guardian. I opened a drawer, found an old framed picture of Marcus at 10 years old, smiling with missing teeth and scraped knees. For a moment, I traced his face with my finger and whispered, "Mama still loves you, baby. But Mama finally loves herself too." Then I placed the picture back, turned off the lights, and climbed into bed. For the first time in decades, my sleep was deep and dreamless, the kind of rest that belongs only to people who have finally claimed their own peace. 3 mornings after the confrontation on my porch, I was sitting in my sunroom, sipping tea and watching the neighborhood come alive. The mail truck passed, kids biked down the street, and for once the air didn't feel heavy. I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. But peace, in my experience, is what comes right before someone tries to steal it. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The chime was gentle, not pounding like Marcus's knock had been. Through the camera feed on my phone, I saw a woman standing on my porch, a stranger, neatly dressed, mid-40s maybe, holding a clipboard and smiling that official kind of smile people wear when they're about to intrude politely. I opened the door, just enough for the screen to separate. Us. Good morning, she said with practiced warmth. My name is Rochelle Simmons from Fulton County Senior Services. We received a report expressing concern about your well-being. Would it be all right if I came in for a brief wellness check? The words hit me like déjà vu. I didn't need to ask who made that report. Marcus and Keisha had moved to their next play, turning me into the story's villain and themselves into caring children worried about their unstable mother. I smiled thinly. Miss Simmons, I said, you seem nice, but I don't do surprise visits. My lawyer will be here shortly. You're welcome to wait outside till he arrives. Her eyebrows lifted a bit, then she nodded. Of course, ma'am. I completely understand. I shut the door and went straight to my phone. Within seconds, Attorney Harold Weaver answered. They called in a wellness check, I said flatly. I figured they might, he replied, calm as ever. Good thing you called me first. Don't answer any questions until I get there. 15 minutes later, his silver sedan pulled up. Harold always looked unbothered. Navy suit, polished shoes, not a bead of sweat even in Georgia heat. He shook Rochelle's hand at the door like they were old colleagues. Good morning, Miss Simmons, he said, his tone measured. I'm here as counsel for Mrs. Laverne Carter. She's agreed to fully cooperate, but I'll remain present for every part of your assessment. That seemed to ease her posture, of course. That's perfectly fine. When they stepped inside, Rochelle's eyes scanned my living room, polished wood floors, the faint smell of lavender and lemon cleaner, photos lined neatly on the mantel. Nothing about that space looked like chaos. She smiled despite herself. You have a beautiful home, Mrs. Carter. Thank you, I said. I try to keep it that way. We sat at the dining table while she took out her clipboard. She asked gentle questions. Was I taking my medication? Did I cook for myself? How often did I see friends? I answered each one clearly, showing her the pill organizer by the counter, my grocery receipts, and a calendar filled with community events and church meetings. When she asked about my family, I didn't sugarcoat it. My son and daughter-in-law are upset because I stopped financing their lifestyle, I said calmly. They're using the system to make me look unfit. But you can see for yourself. Miss Simmons, my bills are paid, my mind's sound, and my home is peaceful now that the begging's stopped. Harold smiled faintly, eyes steady on the woman's pen as it scribbled notes. After 30 minutes, Rochelle put her pen down. Mrs. Carter, I've met a lot of folks in my line of work. Let me tell you something straight. There's nothing wrong with you. You're alert, organized, and clearly in control of your life. I'll close this case today as resolved and unsubstantiated. Relief rushed through me like air in my lungs. Thank you, Miss Simmons. I appreciate that. She smiled softer now. Families can be complicated, Mrs. Carter. Boundaries make people uncomfortable. But you did the right thing having your lawyer here. Protect your peace. When she left, Harold stayed for coffee. We sat by the window where sunlight painted the table gold. They'll probably try something else, he said. Let them, I replied, steady. I spent decades keeping the peace by staying quiet. Not anymore. He raised his mug slightly, as if to toast that declaration. You remind me of my mama. Once she decided she was done being everybody's savior, she became unstoppable. I laughed softly. Guess I'm in good company then. After he left, I sat in the stillness of my home. It wasn't lonely. It was clean, both literally and spiritually. My boundaries were no longer walls, they were doors that opened only to the right people. That evening, just before sunset, Miss Eleanor Jackson came by with a basket of fried catfish and hush puppies. She had that concerned tilt to her head, the kind older women use when they already know what's happened. "Child, I heard about that wellness check mess," she said, shaking her head. "Some folks can't stand to see you stand on your own 2 feet." "You heard right," I said, taking the basket from her. "But I handled it." "Of course you did," she said with a smile. "Ain't nobody fool enough to mistake you for weak." We ate on the porch, listening to cicadas sing as dusk wrapped around the neighborhood. The sky turned violet, then deep indigo, and the air smelled of honeysuckle and fried cornmeal. When Eleanor left, she patted my hand. "Keep shining that light, Miss Laverne. People blinded by greed always mistake it for madness." I stood there long after she was gone, feeling the warmth of her words sink in. Inside, my phone buzzed once. An email notification from Harold confirming the county report had been filed and closed. I set the phone aside, poured myself a small glass of wine, and whispered to the empty room. They tried to say I lost my mind, but all I did was find my peace. Then I turned off the light and let the night hold me, calm, strong, and unbothered. The next week unfolded like calm water, quiet on the surface, though I could feel the currents shifting beneath. Marcus and Keisha hadn't called, but I could sense their anger simmering somewhere out of sight, waiting for another chance to break through. Still, for the first time in years, my days belonged to me. I spent my mornings tending the little patch of garden behind my house. The soil was red and stubborn, but the sunflowers didn't seem to mind. They rose tall and golden, their faces turned toward the light. Sometimes Miss Eleanor Jackson would come by and help me weed while we talked about the world, church gossip, and recipes we both knew by heart. For a while, life felt simple again, ordinary in the best way. One Friday afternoon, I decided to do something braver than I'd realized. I called my older sister, Diana, up in Chicago. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. The last time we'd talked, I'd been gushing about Marcus's success and how proud I was to help him get on his feet. I used to brag about how much I'd sacrificed for my boy, thinking that made me noble. Now, looking back, it just made me naive. The line rang twice before she answered, her familiar voice cutting through the static. "Laverne, Lord, it's been ages. You all right down there?" "I'm better than I've been in a long time," I said, smiling. And I mean that. I told her everything. The wedding I wasn't invited to, the confrontation, the lawyer, even the wellness check. I expected judgment or pity, but she just listened quietly, breathing slow and steady. When I finished, she sighed softly. "Baby sister," she said, "you finally stopped confusing love with obligation." Her words landed deep. "I thought helping him was love," I admitted. "No," she said gently. "Love don't drain you dry. Love don't make you smaller. That was control, the kind that hides behind sweet words." We talked for an hour. I laughed harder than I had in months. Before hanging up, she said, "I'm proud of you, Laverne. You got your wings back." When the call ended, I sat there in my kitchen, feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because she was right. I'd finally freed myself. Heavier because it took me 71 years to understand the difference between love and leverage. That evening, I went to my neighborhood garden club meeting. It was mostly older women, retired teachers, nurses, and widows like me. When they asked how I'd been, I told the truth this time. Not the polished, polite version. The real one. I told them my son had used me for years, how I'd bankrolled his life and been rewarded with betrayal. I expected gasps or pity, but instead, heads nodded around the room. One woman, Mrs. Hightower, put down her teacup and said, "Child, you just told half our stories." Another, Sister Ruth, added, "That's what they do. They make us feel guilty for outliving our usefulness. But you said no, and that's power." Before I knew it, we were all talking at once. Stories of daughters who borrowed money and never paid back. Sons who called only on rent week, grandkids who stopped visiting when the gifts stopped. The air in that little room was thick with laughter and pain, both mingling like truth and healing do when they finally meet. When it got quiet again, Mrs. Hightower reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know what you did, Miss Laverne," she said. "You named the abuse. You pulled it out of the dark where it hides. That's the first step to killing it." Her words stuck with me all night. When I came home, I made myself a cup of peppermint tea and sat by the window, letting the sound of crickets fill the house. I thought about how long I had accepted disrespect because it came dressed as love. I thought about the way Marcus's voice had changed over the years, from soft and grateful to demanding, then accusing. I had let it happen because I was afraid of losing him. But what I lost instead was myself, not anymore. The next morning, I walked to the community center on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, where they held a support group for elders dealing with financial exploitation. The director, Ms. Gloria Brooks, welcomed me with open arms. She was a short, confident woman with box braids streaked with silver and an energy that filled the room. "Come on in, Miss Carter," she said. "We meet every Saturday. Your family here." I listened as others spoke. Veterans, grandmothers, widowers. Their stories were different, but the ache was the same. When it was my turn, I stood slowly, hands trembling just a little. "My name is Laverne," I said, and I stopped letting my own blood drain me dry. They called it love. It wasn't. It was survival. For them, not me. "But I'm still standing," the group clapped softly, not out of politeness, but out of recognition. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt seen. When I left, the morning sun was bright and forgiving. I stopped by the park, sat on a bench, and watched kids run through sprinklers. Their laughter rose into the air, free and wild, the sound of lives not yet burdened by guilt or manipulation. I smiled, thinking maybe it wasn't too late to live that way again. That night, I wrote in my notebook under the page labeled, "Things I Want to Never Mistake Abuse for Love Again." To teach others the same. Then I closed the book and whispered, "The truth don't hurt as much when you finally own it." And for the first time in my 71 years, I felt proud. Not of what I'd given, but of what I'd finally refused to give away. It was a Tuesday morning in early spring when the next blow came. The sky outside my window was the color of slate, heavy with rain, and the world felt quiet in that uneasy way it does before bad news arrives. The letter came certified, official-looking, stiff, and cold. The envelope was thick enough to tell me trouble had weight. My name, Laverne Carter, sat typed neat and centered above the seal of the Fulton County Court. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was. Still, I slit the envelope open with slow, steady hands. Inside was a lawsuit, filed by Marcus and Keisha Carter, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my finances and needed to be placed under guardianship. My own son wanted legal control over me, over my home, my savings, my freedom. For a long time, I just stared at the paper. My eyes moved over the lines, but my mind went blank. Then something inside me broke, not from weakness, but from disbelief. The boy I raised, the man I worked my fingers to the bone for, was dragging me into court like I was some helpless stranger. The phone rang right on cue. I didn't have to check the caller ID. I let it ring until the sound cut off. Then I called attorney Harold Weaver. "They did it," I said. "Filed the petition?" "Yes." "Then it's time we fight back." That same afternoon, I drove to his downtown office, rain streaking the windshield like tears I refused to shed. Harold had already started gathering documentation, medical reports, financial statements, security footage, and witness lists. He was calm, a man who had seen too many families tear themselves apart over money. "They're going to say you've had a mental decline," he warned gently. "They already do," I replied. "They just haven't said it in front of a judge yet." He gave me a look full of quiet respect. "Then let's make sure the truth does." We spent hours preparing, going through every transaction, every written note, every interaction that could prove I was of sound mind and solid memory. He had already contacted Dr. Simone Moore, a cognitive specialist from Grady Memorial Hospital, who agreed to run a full evaluation. The tests were long, detailed, memory, reasoning, focus. But when it was over, Dr. Moore smiled. "Mrs. Carter, your results are flawless. You're sharper than most people 20 years younger. I'll put that in writing." Her kindness made my throat tighten. "Thank you, baby," I said softly. "I appreciate you more than you know." Over the next few weeks, Harold and I built a wall of truth. We gathered statements from Mr. Solomon Summers and Jalen, who testified how clearly I'd handled the security installation. Miss Eleanor Jackson wrote a detailed account of my independence, my routines, and how I'd helped her with her own paperwork when her arthritis flared. Even Andre Green, my pharmacist at the West End Pharmacy, gave a sworn statement explaining how Marcus and Keisha had tried to manipulate him into saying I'd been buying the wrong medication. The lies were everywhere, but we caught them one by one. When Harold showed me the final stack of exhibits, I felt like a soldier looking at armor, solid, shining, and earned. "They can come for me with lies," I said quietly, "but I'm walking in with facts." He smiled. "And dignity. Don't forget that part." A few days later, a process server came to my door with more papers, their witness list. My heart stung as I read it. Marcus Carter and Keisha Banks Carter. Earl Davis, my nosy neighbor from across the street, the one who'd been friendly until I stopped giving him my leftover groceries. Dr. Lehman, a family friend of Keisha's, a psychologist who'd never once examined me. They were building a story. The fragile old woman manipulated by outsiders. I set the papers down, poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and stared out the window at the rain-soaked street. Somewhere in that drizzle, I imagined Marcus as a boy again, his small hand gripping mine as we crossed the street, the way he used to look at me like I was his whole world. I had loved him more than breath. Now that same love was the weapon he wielded against me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the courtroom, the accusing faces, the pitying looks. But beneath the fear, something else was blooming. That same steady, righteous fire that had carried me through every humiliation before. By the time dawn broke, I was dressed and ready. I opened my notebook, the one that once held all the money I'd spent, and wrote across a clean page. They took my kindness for weakness. Let's show them the difference. When I walked into Harold's office later that morning, he looked up and smiled knowingly. "I see that look," he said. "What look?" "The look of a woman who's about to win her own freedom twice." We went over every possible outcome, every tactic they might use. "They'll play on emotion," Harold said. "They'll make you out to be paranoid or confused." "Then I'll do what I've always done," I replied. "Tell the truth until it hurts." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky had cleared into the kind of bright blue that feels like new beginnings. I looked out the window and thought about all the women like me, mothers, grandmothers, caretakers, who had given everything and been told it still wasn't enough. Not this time. Not again. I turned to Harold and said quietly, "When they stand up there and call me unstable, I want them to look in my eyes and see exactly what sanity looks like." He nodded. "They will, Miss Carter. Believe me, they will." That night, I ironed my best navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to Marcus's graduation years ago. I laid it on the chair beside my bed. Tomorrow we'd walk into that courtroom. Tomorrow, I'd face the son who had mistaken my silence for surrender. I turned off the lamp, closed my eyes, and whispered to the dark, "Lord, give me strength to fight with grace." And as the house settled around me, steady and still, I realized something that almost made me smile. This wasn't just about defending my sanity. It was about proving that I had never lost it. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and heavy, like even the sky knew something serious was about to unfold. I woke before sunrise, washed my face, and put on the navy blue suit I'd pressed the night before. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, poised, calm, and sharper than any version of myself I'd known in years. I tied a silk scarf around my neck, dabbed on perfume, and whispered to the woman in the glass, "You don't have to prove you're sane. Just show them you've survived." By 8:30, Attorney Harold Weaver was waiting in the lobby of the Fulton County Courthouse, papers tucked neatly in his briefcase. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day they called me crazy," I said. Inside the courtroom, the air felt tight, thick with whispers and old betrayal. Judge Clarence Miller, tall and serious, presided from the bench with an expression carved out of patience. On one side sat Marcus and Keisha, their lawyer Carl Benton flipping through folders like this was just another day's work. On my side, Harold sat steady beside me, his presence as grounding as the earth itself. Marcus wouldn't look at me. Keisha did, her stare sharp, rehearsed, the kind of look that begged for sympathy from the gallery. She wore all white, like innocence was something you could put on like a dress, the judge began. "This hearing concerns the petition for guardianship filed by Mr. and Mrs. Carter against Mrs. Laverne Carter. We'll begin with the plaintiffs." Carl Benton rose first. His voice was smooth, almost friendly. "Your Honor, this is a case of concern, not greed. My clients simply want to ensure their mother's safety. They've witnessed erratic behavior, sudden withdrawal of financial support, and signs of paranoia. They fear she's being manipulated by individuals with unclear motives." He gestured toward me as if I were an exhibit. "Mrs. Carter has cut off communication, installed excessive security measures, and sought legal counsel unnecessarily. These are not the actions of a woman of sound mind, but of one under undue influence." I felt Harold's hand rest lightly on mine, a silent reminder to hold steady. Then came their witnesses. First up was Earl Davis, the nosy neighbor. He shifted in the witness chair like a man who didn't know how to sit in truth. I seen her acting strange," he said. "Stopped talking to her son, changed her locks, had all these cameras put up. Wouldn't even open the door when her family came by." When Harold cross-examined him, the room went quiet. "Mr. Davis, have you ever been inside Mrs. Carter's home?" "No, sir." "Ever spoken to her for more than 2 minutes in the past year?" "Can't say I have." "So you're saying she's unstable because she doesn't invite you in?" The man squirmed. "I was just concerned, that's all." "No further questions," Harold said, his tone like a soft blade. Next came Dr. Lehman, Keisha's friend, who claimed I'd refused an evaluation. When Harold showed the signed assessment from Dr. Simone Moore confirming my perfect cognitive results, Dr. Lehman's testimony fell apart like wet paper. Keisha took the stand next, her voice trembling, eyes glistening on cue. "Miss Laverne's always been like a second mom to me," she said, hands folded delicately. "But she's changed. She isolates herself. She's suspicious. It's like she's not the same woman who used to love us." When Harold's turn came, his tone turned polite but surgical. "Mrs. Banks Carter, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" She hesitated. "We talked about other things. Can you name one?" Her face stiffened. "Is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting Mrs. Carter?" "Yes," she admitted softly. "And when she asked why, you told her you only invited special people. Is that correct?" Her eyes flashed. Those words were taken out of context. "And what context?" Harold asked, his voice rising slightly. "Makes it acceptable to tell your husband's mother she isn't special?" The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned forward a little. Keisha swallowed hard. "It was a misunderstanding." "No further questions," Harold said, turning away before she could find another lie. Then it was Marcus's turn. Seeing my son walk to that stand was like watching a part of my heart step into fire. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and began his betrayal in earnest. "My mom's been acting irrational," he said. "She's letting strangers control her. She won't let me or Keisha help her anymore. We just want to protect her." Harold waited until the end to rise, slow and calm, his voice steady as stone. "Mr. Carter, how much money has your mother given you in the past 3 years?" Marcus's throat bobbed. "I don't know exactly. Would $33,400 sound right?" He hesitated. Maybe. And how many times have you visited your mother without asking for money? The pause was deafening. I can't recall. You claim you want to protect her. Is it true you and your wife entered her home without permission, reviewed her private papers, and brought a lawyer to persuade her to sign a power of attorney? Marcus's voice dropped to a mumble. We were worried. Worried she'd stop paying your rent? Harold asked quietly. The judge's brow lifted. Keisha shot Marcus a glare sharp enough to draw blood. When Harold finished, there was nothing left of their story but the wreckage of greed and guilt. Then it was our turn. Dr. Simone Moore took the stand first, testifying with clinical precision that I was of excellent mental competence, strong reasoning ability, and perfect recall. Solomon Summers spoke next, describing how I'd personally arranged the security installation, reading every contract detail and paying in full. Miss Eleanor Jackson followed, her voice calm but strong. That woman over there, she said, pointing at me, helped me manage my bills when my eyes got bad. Don't let anyone tell you she's confused. She's just tired of being used. When my name was called, I rose. My legs felt steady, my heart heavy but clear. I took the stand, swore the oath, and faced the courtroom. Harold guided me gently. Mrs. Carter, can you tell the court why you chose to stop supporting your son and daughter-in-law financially? I looked straight at the judge, my voice ringing out steady and low, because I finally understood that what they were giving me wasn't love. It was a transaction. My money was welcome, but I wasn't. They didn't want a mother. They wanted a wallet. I regret only that it took me so long to see it. Carl Benton tried to rattle me in cross-examination, but I met every question with calm clarity. Are you sure you haven't been manipulated by others? He pressed. Yes, I said firmly. For once, I've only been influenced by truth. By the time Harold stood to give his closing argument, the entire courtroom had quieted. His voice carried the weight of justice and empathy both. Your Honor, this is not a case about mental incompetence. This is a case about control. My client has spent her life giving until there was nothing left to give, and now that she's decided to stop, they call her unstable. What the plaintiffs call paranoia, I call wisdom learned through pain. What they call confusion, I call clarity hard-earned. When he sat down, I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Judge Miller removed his glasses, set them on the bench, and said, Court will recess for deliberation. The next 2 hours felt like 2 years. I sat there with my hands folded, staring at the wood grain of the table, whispering quiet prayers under my breath. When the judge finally returned, everyone stood. He cleared his throat and began. After reviewing all evidence, testimony, and medical evaluation, this court finds that Mrs. Laverne Carter is in full possession of her mental faculties. Her financial decisions are rational, legal, and entirely within her rights. Furthermore, the court finds the plaintiff's motivations to be financially driven rather than protective. He paused, looking directly at Marcus. The request for guardianship is denied. The room exploded into whispers. My heart hammered against my ribs, but all I felt was stillness. I had won, I thought. Not just the case, but my life back. As I gathered my papers, I glanced toward Marcus and Keisha. They stood frozen. Keisha's face burned with fury. Marcus's eyes darted away, shame flickering across his features like a passing shadow. For a brief second, I saw the little boy he used to be, frightened, lost. But it was too late. That boy had grown into a man I no longer recognized. Outside the courthouse, the sky had cleared, sunlight breaking through gray clouds like mercy itself. Miss Eleanor, Solomon, and a few of my garden club friends were waiting by the steps with open arms. We hugged tight, laughing and crying all at once. You did it, Miss Laverne, Eleanor said through her tears. No, I told her softly. We did. Every woman who ever had to fight just to be heard. We all won today. That evening, my house filled with warmth. We toasted with lemonade and peach cobbler, not to revenge, but to freedom. When I finally lay down that night, exhaustion hit me like a wave. But under it all was something deeper. Peace. The kind that comes not from winning, but from knowing you never surrendered. When the courthouse doors closed behind me that afternoon, The sound echoed like the end of a long, hard sermon. The kind that leaves you wrung out but clean. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. Not Marcus's guilt, not Keisha's demands, not the shame they tried to dress me in. I walked down those courthouse steps slowly, breathing in the sharp Atlanta air, feeling every inch of my 71 years and every ounce of my hard-won peace. Outside, the world looked brand new. The sunlight hit the marble steps, the breeze smelled faintly of rain, and my friends, Miss Eleanor, Solomon, Tanya from the salon, and a few women from the garden club, were waiting with open arms. Eleanor pressed a small bouquet of hydrangeas into my hands, her eyes bright with pride. "Freedom looks good on you." "Miss Laverne," she said. "It sure does," I laughed, my voice shaking with gratitude. That night, Eleanor hosted a celebration at my house. The table was covered with peach cobbler, sweet tea, collard greens, and fried chicken, the kind of comfort food that heals more than hunger. Music played low, old-school soul and gospel blending in the background, while laughter filled every corner of the home that used to echo with tension. At one point, Solomon raised his glass and said, "To Miss Laverne, proof that peace ain't something they can steal if you refuse to hand it over." Everyone cheered, and I smiled so hard it hurt. For the first time in years, I felt surrounded not by people who wanted something from me, but by people who wished me well. That difference was holy. Later, after everyone had gone home and the house settled into its midnight quiet, I walked through each room barefoot, touching the walls, feeling the warmth that had finally returned to them. I stopped at the living room mantel, where a photograph of Marcus as a little boy still stood. His smile in that picture was pure, unspoiled by greed or resentment. I brushed the glass with my fingers and whispered, "Mama still loves you. I just finally learned how to love me too." The next morning, I woke with purpose. I brewed my coffee, opened the blinds, and sat at the kitchen table where all my battles had started. But instead of bills and legal papers, I spread out a different stack: travel brochures, community newsletters, and a blank notebook titled New Beginnings. The first thing on my list was to sell the house. It had served me well, but it was time to let it go. Too many memories had soaked into its wood, both the sweet and the sour. Within a month, with Harold's help, I sold it to a young black couple just starting out. When I handed them the keys, I saw the joy in their eyes and thought, maybe this house was always meant to give someone else a new start too. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the Chattahoochee River, just outside the city. It wasn't big, but it was beautiful. Wide windows, soft morning light, and a balcony where I could drink tea and watch the water move slow and patient. For the first few weeks, I did nothing but rest. I slept late, walked along the riverbank, and cooked meals that were just for me. When the quiet felt too large, I filled it with music, Nina Simone, Sam Cooke, and the hum of my own thoughts. Then I began something new. I volunteered with Elder Voices Atlanta, a nonprofit that helped seniors recognize and report financial abuse. Every Thursday, I stood before a small group of women and told my story, not as a victim, but as a teacher. I showed them how to say no without guilt, how to separate love from obligation, and how to guard their hearts and bank accounts with equal strength. Sometimes, after class, one of the women would come up to me with tears in her eyes. "Miss Laverne," they'd say, "you told my story." And I'd squeeze their hand and answer, "Then tell yours." That's how we break the silence. Months passed like that, slow, peaceful, sacred. On Sundays, I attended Mount Olive Baptist Church again, sitting in the same pew I'd abandoned years ago when life got too heavy. The first time I walked back in, Pastor Hughes paused mid-sermon and said, "Well, look who the Lord carried home." The congregation clapped, and I felt tears rise as the choir sang, "His eye is on the sparrow." That day I didn't pray for anyone else. I just whispered, "Thank you," over and over, to the God who hadn't abandoned me even when I'd abandoned myself. By summer, I'd booked my first real trip, Savannah by the Sea, a 4-day retreat for senior women. Standing on the pier, watching gulls dip over the water, I felt the wind lift my hair and thought, so this is what freedom smells like. Sometimes I still thought about Marcus. I'd hear a gospel song we used to sing together, or pass a store that sold the kind of sneakers he used to beg for. But the pain had changed shape, no longer sharp, just quiet. I hadn't heard from him since the trial. Maybe one day he'd call, maybe not. Either way, I'd be fine. One evening, sitting on my balcony as the sun melted into the river, I opened my old notebook, the one from before, where I'd once listed every dollar spent on him. On the final page, I wrote one last entry in neat, steady letters, freedom priceless. Paid in full. Then I closed it, leaned back in my chair, and smiled into the fading light. The water flowed slow and golden beneath me. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. The world was still, peaceful, and for the first time in 71 years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval, apology, or love. I had become my own salvation. And Lord, it felt good.